GBA related to contracts and compensation. I'm going to slow down on this one because this is, I think, an exceptionally important revision that we're making to support our newly certified teachers. Mr. Jinko, will you introduce this one, or Mr. Jinko?
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. What we're asking for adoption here is a statement that says, after becoming a fully certified teacher, previous years of verified teaching experience as a full-time non-certified teacher will be credited as years of experience. When a non-certified teacher earns initial certification after October 1st, the increase in salary shall be paid with the next school semester after all necessary documentation has been received and verified.
And for the benefit of the board, this was something that was brought to our attention, that where we were not being competitive with our neighboring districts. Our neighboring districts were giving newly certified teachers those years of service credits, and we were not. So we had a situation where we were helping all of these people become certified, but then the minute that they got certified, they could go to a different district and make more money than what we were offering to pay them. So this was a real flaw in the way that we were doing compensation, and I think it's a great thing that we're getting this fixed.
Yeah. I'll make that motion.
It will also encourage more non-certified teachers.
Right.
Yes. Because there's now a larger jump.
Correct. Not only is it the initial difference becoming certified, but it's also the steps associated with the number of years you taught.
Yes.
So motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons, seconded by Ms. Dominguez. Are there any other questions from the board?
Yes, I have one.
Mr. Bush.
Ron, the only phone call I got about this was a teacher that had, in other parishes or other states, were non-certified, but they were full-time. Are we counting that also?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If that individual becomes certified and we verify from their previous district X number of years, they will get X number of credit years.
Should we add, or that, is it just like it is? Because it doesn't say anything about that.
Well, it says previous years of verified teaching experience as a full-time.
Okay.
That would cover that, yes, sir.
Okay, that's the only question she had when she just
It's a
wanted
good
to.
question, yeah.
And I have a question.
Ms. Dominguez?
Okay, go ahead.
So, Mr. Jinko, this is starting from now, day one, as soon as the board passes this, but we're not retroactively going back and finding people, or we are?
Well, and that is a great question, and we're going to need some help from our employees. We have a list of every one of our teachers, their hire date, with their step and grade that they're on. So what we have been doing is we've been going through preparing for this. To give you an example, Ron Jinko was hired 10 years ago, but was only on step 3. So we have a flag by Ron's name to go back and check with retirement and see. And if Ron has worked those years, he will get that credit. But we're going to send something out to our employees to ask them, do they fit this? And if they do, will be another check and balances for us.
So, for instance, if you have a para who was a para for 8 or 10 years, and then she becomes certified, does that count?
No, ma'am, just as a full-time teacher.
Regular teacher?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Teacher.
Okay, are we gonna pay them retroactive?
No, sir, we're going to pay them steps, but we're not going to go back.
No.
Correct, no, sir.
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if we made them, if they gained their certification 3 years ago.
Right, we can't go back.
We didn't have this rule in place.
Right.
We can fix it today.
But they would get their 3 years experience of steps. That's
Okay,
what
so
they
will
would get,
all right.
correct.
So
While we're on this topic, I had somebody call me yesterday that had been teaching in an accredited private school, not public, and wanted to know why those years wouldn't count when that person came from a school that was accredited.
Are they a certified teacher?
Yes.
They should count. They need to contact them tonight and ask them to email me.
You mean were they then or now?
Or were they now?
Are they now? Yeah, now. Okay,
Yeah.
and so the years in a non-public school would count?
Were they a certified teacher then?
I'm gonna find that out.
Ask them to email me,
Okay.
please.
I think that was my question I was getting at too, was if you came from a private school, church school, but you were considered a full-time teacher, and you became certified, and you taught there for 5 years, and you were a full-time teacher.
But it has to be accredited.
if it isn't accredited, I mean, we're following what we have here, we would give that individual those years, yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions from the board? Any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the questions, ask members to vote your no.
Voting is open.
Y'all tempted me to come back, Mr. Janko. I'm done.
Come on back, sir.
Do it.
It's sweet, man. Still in my hands to talk.
You gotta wait 2 years.
Yeah, I believe there's a provision you have to wait. Is it 2 years? I knew it was 1 at least, but it's 2.
As low of teachers we are, you ought to be begging me to start January 1st.
Oh,
We'll beg
voting
you,
is
we just-
closed.
Just can't do
But
it legally.
It's you that would get in trouble, not us.
There's an ethical
I can go
possibility.
5 miles from my house and have a great job, but that's just crazy.
Come be a playground monitor at Spring Creek.
Motion
Then
passes.
they got a fence, I feel better, 'cause I'm hitting over.
They got a fence.
Stay out the water, right?
Motion passed, Mr. Duncan.
All right, next item on the agenda, another, I think, very important policy revision related to the employment of retirement personnel. This is policy GBDB. Mr. Jinko, if you could introduce this one for us.
Thank you again, Mr. Duncan. This is a complicated legislative process, to say the least, guiding the employment of retired personnel. Has been revised several times in recent years. They've shortened the policy to kind of reference those statutes and reflects very recent changes from June of 2022. That's what you note in the blue. And what they have sent to all HR departments is kind of cheat sheets. And this is what we go by, kind of a, kind of a flow chart, depending on when you retired, what you retired as, what you're coming back, when you're coming back, et cetera. It is, and again, this is Ron's personal opinion. In an area where we're having trouble finding educators, we should make it a little bit easier for them to come back instead of more difficult. And that's just Ron Jinko. That has nothing to do with the reflecting on this group here. But it is a crazy process that takes a lot of time, and a lot of questions have to be asked of the individual.
And as of right now, Mr. Jinko, the legislature has still put limitations on which types of teachers we can bring back out of the retirement system. That says high needs, like special education, math, and science,
Yes, sir.
and I think English, right?
Correct.
So even though we think there's other areas that are high need for us, we can't just designate those as
as a critical shortage. Correct.
critical shortages. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revision?
I'll make that motion.
Motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Westmoreland seconds the motion. Are there any other questions from the board on the proposed revisions? I did notice one typo.
I see that.
We'll fix that, I'm assuming.
Yes.
We'll go with the superintendent instead of he superintendent. Any other?
Actually do that, make sure we read it right.
She tried to hide it with a staple on here.
Yeah.
That's the fine print.
Any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question and ask members to vote your devices.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is some proposed revisions to policy GBN. These proposed revisions come in again out of our September 22 policy alert from Forethought. This looks like some minor typographical changes.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revisions?
I make the motion.
Motion is made by Mr. Bush. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Westmoreland. Any questions from the board on the proposed revisions? Any public input? Hearing none, call the question and ask members to vote your devices.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda are some proposed revisions to GBRIB related to sick leave. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. This is just, they've added the use of sick leave for special circumstances is the one change that they've made there.
Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revisions?
Make a
Make
motion to.
I'll second.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Questions from the board?
We don't have a list of those special circumstances.
No,
It's going to be
sir.
on an individual basis.
Our thought, it is going to be for, let's say, family members, taking care of sick family members, et cetera.
Can we say personal illnesses, comma, other emergencies or special circumstances?
Do you want me to add a comma?
We'll take the word or out.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Any public input? Hearing none, call a question, ask members to vote your machine.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda, proposed revisions to GBRID related to military leave. Again, coming out of our policy alert from Forethought. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, sir. Statute that allows a teacher whose employment was interrupted by military service be placed upon return to employment as a teacher on the salary schedule that he would have been if his or her employment had not been interrupted. So if I'm on step 3 and, I'm going to serve my country for 2 years, I'd come back, I'll be placed on step 5.
So move.
Second.
Motion is made by Mr. Toller, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons to adopt the proposed revision. Any questions from the board? Any public input? Hearing none, call the question, ask members to vote your devices.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda are proposed revisions to JGCE related to child abuse. Again, coming out of our policy alert from Forethought. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Just notes that students shall be provided age and grade appropriate instruction relative to child assault awareness and prevention, and that each school shall place the hotline number on this website.
Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revisions?
I'll make the motion.
Motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Westmoreland. Any questions from the board? Any public input? Hearing none, call the question, ask members to vote your devices.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
And the final items on the agenda are a package of policy revisions that we're working on to try to protect the time of our instructors related to their collaboration and planning periods, and also to ensure that they are properly compensated if they're asked to work or do more instructional duty outside of certain limits. We're still working on this package, and what I'm asking the board, the committee to do today is just to table these over to our next committee meeting so that we can continue working on this and gaining some consensus on how exactly we want to tackle this. But it's certainly something that I'm still committed to making sure that we get done for our teachers. I just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. So if there's a motion, we're asking that all of Section 3 be tabled over to our next policy committee meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there any, the motion to table is non-debatable. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open.
I think in the history of education, we've never asked our people to work more and to do more than we are today. So
Absolutely.
this is a great idea.
All right, there being
Voting
no
is
other.
closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. There being no other business to come before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.